My father's birthday dinner was supposed to be a joyous occasion, a celebration filled with laughter and shared memories, but as I sat there, the weight of unresolved grief rested heavily on my chest. It's funny how the three of us, my dad, my sister Sarah, and I, had always formed a tight-knit unit, yet recent events had begun to fracture that bond. Just 6 months had passed since I suffered a miscarriage, a time when my world turned gray, where joy felt like a distant memory, and the unwavering support I had hoped for from my family seemed, at best, insufficient. I had spent weeks preparing myself for this dinner, eager to distract my mind and feel a sense of normalcy again, but a knot began to twist in my stomach as soon as we arrived at the quaint little restaurant my dad loved. The walls were decorated with photographs from his past birthdays, capturing moments of bliss that now felt unbearably distant. As our waiter brought over the first round of drinks, I inhaled deeply, trying to soak in the laughter of others at nearby tables, the clinking of glasses ringing like a soft melody in my ears. My dad, with his warm eyes twinkling, regaled us with stories from his youth, tales of cross-country road trips and shenanigans with friends. I smiled and took sips of my wine, cherishing the moments of levity he brought, yet shadows loomed in my heart, blossoming with each passing minute. That's when I heard it, a quiet voice carrying through the room, sharp enough to slice through the cheerful hum of conversation. Sarah, seated just across from me, casually remarked to her partner, "Well, at least Mom didn't have to deal with a tiny grave this year." The words dropped heavily into the air, and for a moment, the world around me faded. My heart raced, and my fingers gripped the edge of the table as dread washed over me like bitter cold water. How could she say something so callous? The hurt of my loss bubbled up, intertwining with a complex blend of anger and disbelief. I had always considered Sarah my closest confidant, but now she felt like a stranger, one who didn't comprehend the weight of what I had been through or the sensitivity required when discussing grief. It took all my strength to maintain a facade of composure, but each shallow breath hinted at the storm brewing within me. The entire dinner suddenly felt unbearable, my father's laughter ringing hollow as myriad thoughts cascaded through my mind. I felt the familiar urge to flee, to escape the suffocating reality of my sister's insensitivity. Finally, unable to bear it any longer and desperate to shield myself from any further emotional assault, I stood up, excusing myself with a shaky voice. My dad's laughter dimmed, and an uneasy silence crept in as he looked up, confusion clouding his features. I hurried toward the restroom, each step feeling like an avalanche of regret crashing down on me, for leaving, for how my sister could be so ignorant of my pain, for what was supposed to be a celebration of my father's life morphing into a spotlight on my loss. Once inside the small, dimly lit restroom, I stared at my reflection in the mirror, trying to decipher the woman looking back. Anger flared like wildfire, and I told myself I was justified to feel this way. I reached for my phone, contemplating sending a message to my sister, maybe to explain how her comment had tangled my heart in knots. But each time I typed a word, it felt inadequate, like I was fumbling to convey a deep sadness that she may never understand. I left the restaurant, heart aching and burdened, and as I sat alone in my car, the muffled sounds of the joyful gathering faded into the night. I ruminated over my sister's words, wondering if I had truly overreacted. I drove home in silence, clutching the steering wheel tight, the road ahead blurring through tears. I tried to keep at bay. It wasn't until I got home that I found a sliver of calmness, the weight of the day beginning to lift, and I reflected on the necessity of self-care amidst the chaos. Maybe my response to Sarah was not just about her comment, it was my silent plea for recognition of my pain, a desperate call for empathy that I longed for, yet struggled to express. Weeks passed, and I hesitated, swirling in miscommunication and confusion. Then one quiet afternoon, I finally decided to reach out to Sarah. I texted her, opening the doors for a conversation that would lead us into fragile territory. To my surprise, she responded almost immediately, expressing her own vulnerability. Sarah confessed she had been scared to address my loss, unsure of how to support me, fearing she would say the wrong thing. In turn, I explained how her thoughtless comment had sent me spiraling, how grief could feel isolating, especially in the walls built between family. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. Instead, it transformed into a delicate stitch, communication slowly weaving our hearts back together. We realized we had been struggling at opposite ends of the same spectrum, needing each other without knowing how to reach out. As for our father's birthday, I returned to our family dinners, hesitant yet hopeful, ready to make new memories, learning the ebb and flow of grief and joy intertwined. It wouldn't always be easy, but perhaps through understanding, even those heavy ties could strengthen our bond. A few months later, we even planned a gathering to honor my lost baby, A gentle way for us all to acknowledge the fragility of life together. It wasn't just about acknowledging my hurt anymore, it became a shared experience that drew us closer, nurturing the bond we once thought lost. This whole experience taught me a powerful lesson about the intricacies of grief. We can be both hurt and hurting without meaning to, and sometimes the simplest misstep can lead to the most profound realizations. In the end, we came to understand that healing is a journey best walked together, even when the path may be a bit rocky. As the weeks rolled on, my family and I began to reshape the focus of our gatherings, infusing them with stories about the loved ones we had lost and celebrating the lives we still had. Each meeting became a chapter in our collective healing, and slowly, we found joy in shared laughter and nostalgic recollections, all while allowing room for tears when they surfaced. It felt surreal at times, navigating the delicate balance between joy and sorrow. My sister would often reminisce about growing up, cracking jokes about our childhood antics, and I would join in, laughing until I forgot about the heavy ache nestled within my heart. Yet, with every joke, I was acutely aware of an underlying tension that lingered. Our grief was raw, and though we had found a semblance of healing, there were still unspoken words tethered to our experiences. One evening, after what had been a particularly lovely dinner filled with good food and laughter, I noticed my sister staring out the window, her brow furrowed in a way that suggested a silent battle was happening inside her. It was a moment of connection lost in translation, and somehow I knew that she was wrestling with her own guilt, her own questions about our shared experience of loss. Taking a deep breath, I asked her what was on her mind, and she hesitated before her voice came out as merely a whisper. "I can't believe how different life feels now. Do you think we'll ever get back to normal?" As she looked at me, vulnerability flickering in her eyes, I recognized the fear she held, fear that our family would remain fractured, struggling beneath the weight of absence. I reached for her hand, a simple gesture meant to convey solidarity, signaling that the pathway to normal was no longer our goal. Together, we were redefining what our family meant. In the days that followed, we made it a point to engage in small but meaningful rituals. We repurposed anniversaries of our losses into days of gratitude, where we would sit together, perhaps with a candle lit or a favorite photo framed between us, and recount stories of our loved ones, mirthful tales mixed with those easier to swallow that were steeped in love. My sister opened up more, sharing her own struggles with guilt and regret, angles of grief I hadn't seen before. Each conversation gradually eroded the walls we had built around our hearts. We remembered not just those who had left us but also acknowledged our shared humanity and the heavy burden it bore. Healing often felt like 2 steps forward and 1 step back, but each shared moment brought us closer to the heart of what it meant to be family. My father, who had been notably quiet after my loss, appeared to appreciate this newfound dynamic, often chiming in with his own stories that nurtured the laughter in our home once again. He became a stalwart foundation beneath our feet, always encouraging us to lean on him when the weight of our sorrow became too heavy to bear alone. I learned that he, too, was navigating his grief in his own way, the quiet moments of reflection weaving together a narrative of strength and vulnerability that inspired me to keep pushing forward. As spring began to emerge with its floral blooms, glimmers of hope sparkled amidst our healing. I had always held the belief that moments of shared vulnerability could bind us closer together, and my experience had only reinforced that notion. The rocky path I had trekked with my sister transformed into vibrant hues of compassion. However, it wasn't until one particular afternoon, while we were sipping coffee on the porch, that I felt we had truly turned a corner. "You know," my sister said, her fingers absent-mindedly tracing the rim of her cup, "I think about the baby often. I still grieve, but it feels different now. It's more about remembering than just sadness." Those words settled around us like a gentle breeze, palpable yet comforting as we both acknowledged the bittersweet nature of our memories. By this point, I realized healing wasn't a linear path but rather an intricate tapestry of emotions, perspectives, and connections. As the sun dipped below the horizon that evening, casting hues of gold across the landscape, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude for where we were. This persistent journey teased out the best of us, the lessons learned, the love rekindled, and bonds fortified through shared experiences of grief and love. Looking back now, I understand that acknowledging our individual and collective hurt was just the beginning. It was essential to honor those we lost, yet it was equally pivotal to foster life in our own hearts while doing so. As I reflect on my journey, I find comfort in knowing that while the scars may never completely fade, they have transformed into marks of love, reminders of life's fragility that allowed us to grow as individuals and as a family. Healing becomes a narrative constantly rewritten, just as our love continues to bloom, bright and enduring, A cycle of remembrance and connection that honors not just the lost but also those still here, cherishing every moment we share together. Update: a few months later, when the fall leaves began to blanket the ground, my sister and I found ourselves volunteering at a local charity that supported families who had experienced loss. We thought perhaps we could bring some comfort to others navigating similar paths, and in doing so, strengthened our bond even further. Each story shared was a reminder of our resilience, proving that together, we were not only bereaved but beautifully alive, creating new pages for the chapters that lay ahead. The crisp air of autumn wrapped around us like a soft blanket as I walked alongside my sister, Emma, through the bustling community center. The scent of cinnamon and nutmeg wafted from the nearby kitchen, where volunteers were preparing a feast for the families we hoped to support. I looked at Emma, her hair dancing in the light breeze, and felt a warmth blossom in my heart. It was hard to believe how much had changed since that fateful birthday dinner, where everything had unraveled in a flash of pain and misunderstanding. The air felt lighter now, like the weight of grief had transformed into something we could carry together. Volunteering became a sacred ritual for us, not just a service to others, but a space for our own healing. Each week, we would share stories with those who understood our journey, laughing, crying, and sometimes sitting in contemplative silence. It was in these moments, surrounded by people clinging to hope amidst their sorrow, that we found clarity in our suffering. One evening, after we had helped set up the space for a support group meeting, Emma turned to me with that familiar, mischievous glint in her eye. She suggested we create a special gratitude wall, a place where we could post notes of appreciation for the little things in life, like the laughter shared over coffee, or the warmth of a hug on a cold day. I loved this idea. It felt like we were taking our grief and turning it into something beautiful, offering it to others as a light guiding them through their darkest moments. Days turned into weeks, and soon we were consumed by an unexpected project, a charity event that would not only raise funds but also spread awareness about the often taboo subject of baby loss. Emma and I brainstormed passionately over cups of tea, envisioning a candlelight vigil to honor those we had lost and to celebrate the lives still being lived. I felt a flutter of excitement. It was empowering to take control of our sorrow, to transform it into a platform that could help others. I reached out to potential speakers, healing coaches, and even local artists who had experienced similar losses, inviting them to share their stories and talents. Our community embraced the idea, gathering behind us, and soon what was once a simple concept blossomed into an event that rippled throughout the town. The day of the vigil arrived, and as the sun set in a blaze of orange and gold, I stood at the forefront of a small group, my heart racing with anticipation. Emma squeezed my hand and smiled, a reassuring gesture that brought me comfort. I spoke openly about our journey, about how we had walked through fire only to emerge stronger, and it felt cathartic to release our story into the world. As candles flickered to life, their gentle flames reflecting in the eyes of those gathered, I felt a profound sense of connection, no longer alone in my sorrow, but part of something much greater. Each shared remembrance, each tear, and each smile became a thread weaving us together, reminding me that grief, while isolating, could also create a community of love and understanding. After the event, as we cleaned up and started to close the space for the night, Emma surprised me with a warm hug. "I didn't think we could turn our sadness into something so beautiful," she said, a hint of disbelief in her voice. "But look at what we did." I nodded, overwhelmed with emotion. The evening had been a testament to resilience, not just ours but of everyone who had braved their own storms. Just when I thought I couldn't feel more connected to Emma, I realized the shared labor of love had sewn us closer, and the fragile harmony we had nurtured gave me hope with deep, unwavering roots. As the days faded into the past, I sometimes found myself reflecting quietly in my room, on the journey that had led me to this moment. It was strange how the air around us seemed to shimmer now, imbued with a sense of possibility and healing. I understood now that while the loss would always be a part of me, it no longer defined my narrative. Instead, it underscored my resilience and illuminated the importance of love and community. Update: a few months later, as winter cloaked the world in white, I received a letter from one of the families we had helped through the charity event. The mother expressed gratitude so heartfelt it felt as though she had reached into my chest to tug at my heartstrings. She informed me that they named their newborn daughter after the baby I had lost. Somehow, those words wove through my grief and into a new, hopeful chapter. I realized that I, too, was creating life anew, forging connections that honored the past while celebrating the present. It brought me comfort to know that even amid loss, love was still growing, binding us all in a beautiful tapestry of remembrance and hope. And so, as the world outside darkened early, I wrapped myself in a blanket of warmth and possibility, letting sleep find me with a heart full of love, knowing that together with Emma, we were brightening the path for others, and ourselves, in this ever-evolving journey of life. I never thought I'd find myself in a battle of principles with someone I loved, especially over something that seemed so trivial at first, a project that I only half listened to during a late-night chat on our worn-out sofa. My boyfriend Ben had always been the type brimming with creativity, a hyperactive mind buzzing with the latest genius ideas that flitted in and out of his consciousness. I could barely keep up, often nodding along, knowing he thrived in that space of wild imagination. But to me, ideas were just that, dreams waiting for the right moment. I, on the other hand, was more grounded, living my life by what made sense, especially when it came to finances. One calm evening, however, things took a turn. Ben excitedly shared his latest brainchild, a subscription service for personalized jars of homemade pickles. He envisioned people worldwide, savoring his unique flavor combinations and being inspired by his passion for pickling. The enthusiasm in his eyes was infectious, but all I could muster was a hesitant smile. As he continued, the idea sounded more and more ludicrous. I knew Ben, he lacked the business acumen to even set up a proper website, let alone manage logistics. When he asked for a few $100s to kickstart this vision, my heart sank. It was the first real moment of pause for me, where I realized that this idea, which he held so dear, wasn't something I could support. I suggested a thorough business plan or some trial runs first, but Ben's face fell. He accused me of lacking faith in his genius, and my initial hesitation quickly spiraled into a profound sense of guilt. I loved him, yet I feared enabling a dream that might lead to heartbreak. Days dragged on, filled with awkward silences and unspoken words. I would lie awake at night, wrestling with my thoughts, wondering if I was truly the one in the wrong for considering the practicalities over his dreams. Did wanting reassurance make me an obstacle in his creative journey? Or was I simply protecting our future? Eventually, I proposed a compromise. We could allocate a small portion of our savings to conduct a few test runs, perhaps even host a local tasting event to gauge interest. The immediate relief on his face was unnerving, turning into an easygoing laugh, but it felt like I was pitching a half-hearted agreement to soothe my conscience. Yet, in the following weeks, I noticed something beautiful emerging when we collaborated. Ben, reinvigorated by purpose, immersed himself in researching recipes, and I even joined him in trying different methods, navigating the kitchen like a team. It became a bonding exercise of sorts, like stirring our love into each pickle jar, and slowly, anxiety morphed into excitement. Then came the day of the tasting event. I watched with bated breath as he presented his flavors to a small gathering of neighbors, friends, and onlookers. The joy on his face mirrored the glee of people who savored his pickles, and in that moment, I realized that my overarching fear of financial disaster paled in comparison to the happiness this endeavor brought us. I didn't need to abandon my principles, rather, I could support him while ensuring we tread carefully. The night ended in shared accolades and unexpected orders. The burst of laughter and shared dreams felt liberating. Reflecting on those moments, I learned that it wasn't just about my resistance to fund a failed endeavor, it was about navigating the balance between supporting creativity while honoring my grounded nature. In an ironic twist, a few months down the line, our pickle business, now affectionately named Ben's Brine, gained traction, drawing local vendors' interest, including a small deli that wanted to carry our products. While I still often struggled with the concept of financial risk, I began to appreciate the beauty of possibility. Still, I made a silent vow to remain cautious, ensuring that, while we dreamt big, our feet stayed grounded in reality. I realized love wasn't only about encouragement, it was also about clever navigation of ideas and support through practicality. Perhaps the struggle between imagination and reality was as indispensable as the flavors in our jars, melding into something uniquely our own. I would often smile at our journey, and one evening, after watching Ben meticulously pack orders, I felt an urge to share our story on Reddit, a blend of AITA and our /relationship sentiment swirling in my head. Am I the asshole for refusing to fund my boyfriend's genius idea? Seemed like a fitting title, but deep down, it transformed into a thread about two imperfect people forging a path together, where dreams and rationality coexisted in their own peculiar harmony. I pressed post and watched as comments poured in, eager to share our message of love and compromise with a world that might just need to hear it. As the comments started rolling in, my heart raced with a mix of excitement and trepidation. I found myself caught in a tide of responses, both affirming and questioning. Some users rallied behind my decision, calling it wise not to sink my savings into a risk that could lead to financial ruin. Others, however, championed Ben's creativity, urging me to believe in his vision, to have faith that sometimes the greatest risks yield the sweetest rewards. I leaned back in my chair, considering the dissonance of it all. Ben's genius idea, as he called it, was a subscription model for a quirky line of eco-friendly pet products. Think biodegradable chew toys and organic catnip laced with chamomile. The concept had merit and, more importantly to me, was a reflection of Ben's love for animals and commitment to sustainability, but the financial commitment weighed heavily on my mind. I imagined what it would be like to face our friends and family if everything went south. No one seemed to share the fantasy of becoming an overnight success, and I worried that my determination to be practical would be painted as lack of support for his dreams. That night, after reading through countless comments that felt like both validation and scrutiny, I sat on the couch while Ben scrolled through social media. I watched him, the light from the screen casting shadows that flickered across his face, and I felt a warmth surge in my chest. Beneath the layers of my doubt lay a deep love for him and a recognition of the immense effort he was putting into his idea. When he mentioned his plans for a booth at the local farmers market the next week, my heart sank. It felt like a band-aid being ripped off over a wound I hadn't fully addressed. I decided it was time to talk. Ben, can we chat for a minute? I asked, my voice wavering slightly. He paused, glancing at me with those bright eyes that exuded both hope and a hint of vulnerability. We sat together, our knees almost touching on that old, worn couch we'd picked up together from a thrift store. He watched me intently as I fumbled to find the words, my mind racing through all the implications and feelings. I want you to know that I admire what you're doing. Your passion for the eco-friendly concept is inspiring, I started gently, gauging his reaction. He nodded, a small smile breaking until I continued, but I'm really struggling with the idea of funding this venture. I let the words hang in the air, framing my concerns without diminishing his dreams. Ben shifted, his smile dimming slightly as he absorbed my words. I get that. I really do, he said, his tone steady but tinged with disappointment. But, you have to see it from my perspective too. This could be something great. I just need a little support to make it happen. As I watched him grapple with my reluctance, it struck me how deeply we were caught in this tangled web of aspirations and realities, and maybe, just maybe, if we navigated it together, we would find common ground. I took a deep breath, drawn back to the Reddit thread I had just posted. It dawned on me that my initial impulse to share our story didn't just stem from wanting to seek external validation. I wanted accountability, an open dialogue about pushing boundaries without losing oneself in the process. Okay, how about this? I proposed, choosing my words carefully. Instead of jumping into a financial commitment, what if we brainstorm some smaller steps? We could put together a prototype, seek local feedback, maybe even test the waters at the booth without significant investment. His eyes widened slightly, hope flickering back to life as he saw the possibility within my suggestion. Are you serious? He asked incredulously, a slight tremor in his voice. You'd help me build it? My heart warmed as I nodded, feeling the electric charge of connection radiate between us. Let's work on it together. You could need my help with the marketing side of things, and I believe we can find a middle ground. Relief washed over his features. There was still fear of the unknown lurking in the background, but I could see that he wasn't looking for unwavering support or financially empty promises. He just longed for partnership in a dream that felt elusive. As discussions progressed over the next few weeks, the feedback loop we created became a crucible for creativity, a rich, textured place where my pragmatism met his enthusiasm. This venture became a shared dream, steered away from the precipice of reckless abandon by our collective input. Meanwhile, my Reddit post continued to garner attention, with many users following along as I updated them about our small victories. We received encouragement and advice from strangers who rooted for us in our public yet intimate journey. One particularly heartwarming comment caught my eye: it's not about who's right or wrong. It's about two people growing together. It resonated with me deeply, and I found truth in those words. This was less an AITA situation and more a testament to how love balances dreams and reality in the most unexpected ways. As Farmers Market Day approached, we stood in the garage, putting together the last touches on our display. Ben's excitement was palpable as he unveiled the prototype, a brightly painted wooden barrel filled with the biodegradable toys he had crafted. There was a moment when he turned to look at me, his eyes gleaming with a mix of fear and exhilaration. I felt my heart swell as we posed for photos in front of our booth, laughter bubbling between us. It was in those moments I realized I wasn't just sharing a workspace, I was sharing his vision, and in doing so, I had learned how to celebrate the beauty of compromise. And when the market opened, feet shuffling and voices blending into an earthy symphony, we were overwhelmed with warmth from our community, a vibrant tapestry resulting in conversations that bridged strangers and friendships alike. The day was a success that unfolded before us, not just in sales but in connection and shared smiles. As we packed up, I wouldn't say we were out of the woods yet, but I finally felt aligned with Ben in our pursuit. The Reddit post still echoed in my mind, but now I didn't view it through the lens of whether I was the asshole. Instead, I realized that we were just storytellers, weaving our tale of love through uncertainty, faith, and ultimately, shared dreams. A few weeks later, I provided an update on the original post. After some soul-searching conversations, Ben and I found a way to support each other's dreams while still being practical about our finances. We're currently thriving at the farmer's market, learning and evolving together. Thanks for all the thoughtful insights. Everyone's input truly helped save our relationship. I felt the weight lift as I shared our growth, my heart full with the understanding that love, in all its messy beauty, often thrives in those gray areas. And in that swirling mix of vulnerability and perseverance, we realized we were navigating our path, together. But just as I settled into this rhythm, the future we had started building together began to feel less certain. The farmer's market had become our weekend ritual, a place where we showcased not only our homemade products but also our shared dreams. Each Saturday felt like a small victory. We laughed at customers' reactions, shared bites of homemade snacks with each other, and celebrated our modest earnings with a quick trip to the local cafe. However, as the weeks passed, I noticed that Ben seemed increasingly distracted. I could see the glimmer of ideas flitting behind his eyes, but instead of sharing them with me as he used to, he wrapped his thoughts in layers of secrecy. One evening, after a brisk day at the market, I caught him sketching ideas in his notebook, a faraway look casting shadows across his face. "Hey, what's going on in that head of yours?" I asked, attempting to bridge the distance that had begun to grow between us. He glanced up, surprise mingled with something that felt ominous. "Nothing. Just some ideas for the next phase of our venture," he replied nonchalantly, but I sensed an undercurrent of something deeper lurking beneath his surface. It was then that I felt my heart flutter with unease, and I couldn't shake the feeling that a storm was brewing, and I was left without an umbrella. I pressed for more details, and with each question, I sensed him pulling further away, the bubble of excitement I had once felt about our relationship now punctured by simmering tension. After several days of half-hearted conversations, little truths began to unfurl like the petals of a flower refusing to bloom in harsh soil. One evening, over dinner, I took a leap. "Ben, I feel like we're not on the same page anymore. Are you really happy with how things are going?" The weight of my words hung between us, and his fork clattered against his plate. He looked at me, eyes wide, then opened his mouth to speak but quickly shut it again, glancing down instead. Finally, he let out a long breath. I've been thinking about expanding our business further than the market. There's a whole online community for what we do, and I want to tap into it." There it was, the floodgate had opened. His dreams were widening, and while that might seem beautiful, I felt a familiar turmoil rise in my chest. "That sounds amazing, but aren't we stretching ourselves too thin?" I asked, trying to mask the fear creeping in. "I mean, we barely have enough time as it is, and what about the risk? We can't just throw more money into something that might not work." His face hardened at my words, and in that moment, I felt the fragile balance we'd achieved begin to teeter. "I thought we were in this together, the whole point was to support each other," he replied, a hint of indignation sharpening his voice. As he spoke, I could see the flame of his ambition battling despair, but beneath it all, my own fear flared up in response. It felt like we were on two separate islands, and I couldn't even reach him on a bridge made of words. That night, I lay awake, replaying our conversation in my mind like a broken record. In just a matter of weeks, our quaint partnership felt strained under the weight of ambition and uncertainty. I found solace in the soft sounds of the nighttime world outside, crickets serenading me as I tried to quell my worry. The following days bore the weight of unspoken words, and our once lively market days morphed into a quiet ritual of forced smiles and muted laughter. Ben seemed more electric than ever, distant but burning with ideas that fed off my fears. I couldn't help but wonder if his vision for our business included a space for me at all. It took several days of silent simmering before I reached a breaking point. One Saturday, during a lull between customers at the market, I confronted Ben again. "What if we come up with a clear plan together, instead of you going ahead solo? I want to support you, Ben, but I need to feel included in what we're building. Your dreams matter to me, but so does our partnership." His gaze met mine, piercing yet unsure, and I held my breath. The silence stretched between us like a taut wire ready to snap. Slowly, realization seemed to dawn upon him, the anger fading just a little to expose a flicker of understanding. I guess I didn't consider how my ambitions have started to push us apart. I was so focused on getting ahead that I forgot why we started this together in the first place. I felt a swell of relief wash over me, as if a heavy curtain had been drawn back, allowing sunlight to seep into the stifling darkness of my worries. After that, something shifted between us. Ben began including me in his brainstorming sessions, drafting plans together late into the evening, and for the first time in weeks, I felt my enthusiasm reignite. We created a strategy that both respected his dreams and acknowledged our limitations, crafting a delicate dance between risk and reward. As we navigated our way through that process, it became clear that this journey wasn't just about individual aspirations but about weaving our dreams together, one thread at a time. With renewed energy, we launched our online store, balancing our market presence with the new venture. Month by month, sales grew, ideas flourished, and miraculously, so did our relationship. It wasn't without its bumps. Some nights ended in frustration when technology failed us or when we faced competition that made us second-guess our approach, but we learned to communicate through the challenges instead of around them. In those moments of doubt, we would often revisit that original post I had shared on Reddit, the one that had stirred so much conversation and reflection. It became a reminder of the messy and beautiful journey we were on. Our different facets started to harmonize, turning discord into a beautiful melody that felt uniquely ours. Eventually, as I looked back on that time, I realized the power of love not only to lift us up but to ground us in the essence of who we are. Our experience at the farmer's market became not just a business endeavor but the backbone of our relationship, a shared narrative where our hopes intertwined like the strings of a well-played instrument. And as I lay in bed that night, listening to the soft rhythm of Ben's breathing next to me, I whispered a quiet thank you to the universe for the lessons learned and the love that continually shaped us. It wasn't about avoiding the storms but dancing together in the rain, finding joy in the journey and in one another. It started like any other weekend in my cozy apartment, sunlight streaming in through the living room window, casting soft shadows on the walls adorned with my paintings. I'd spent most of the week in my studio, experimenting with colors and textures, lost in a world of creativity that often felt like my only refuge. Art had always been my passion, and with each brushstroke, I poured my heart into every canvas, treating each piece as a personal expression of my inner landscape. My boyfriend, Henry, often remarked how he admired my talent, but I could tell there was a part of him that didn't quite understand the depths of my connection to my work. Whenever he'd come over, he'd inevitably reach for my brush or try his hand at mixing paints, thinking this would draw us closer. I appreciated his enthusiasm, but it often felt like an intrusion. One Saturday afternoon, I was preparing to start a new canvas, envisioning a vibrant sunset that fused fiery oranges with deep purples. It was the kind of piece I desperately wanted to share with the world. As I organized my paints, Henry strolled in with a new set of acrylics he'd picked up from a nearby store. "I thought we could have some fun today," he said, his eyes bright with excitement. I felt a pang of annoyance, but instead of voicing it, I smiled and suggested we hang out first, letting him have the run of my living room with his beginner's brushes. He agreed, and we spent a while chatting, munching on snacks, and throwing paint at some scrap boards I didn't mind getting ruined. But then things took a turn. After seeing me work, Henry casually, almost haphazardly, grabbed one of my larger canvases, the one I had set aside for my sunset masterpiece, and started to cover it with a vibrant green blob. My heart sank as I froze, watching him work. No, I whispered more to myself than to him. That's not. You can't just, but before I could articulate my frustration, he stepped back and said, "Look at that. I made something." All I could see was the destruction of my vision, the piece I had been nurturing in my mind for days, reduced to a chaotic mess of colors that didn't belong. Bitterness seeped through my resolve, and I attempted to explain how important that canvas had been to me, but he just shrugged, a smile plastered on his face, completely unaware of my growing agitation. It felt like a betrayal, and at that moment, I couldn't find the words to convey how hurt I was. The day ended on a strained note, and after he left, I hovered over the ruined canvas, tears pooling in my eyes. I didn't even want to look at it anymore, and something inside me snapped. I rolled it up and tossed it into the trash, almost feeling an odd sense of satisfaction as I did so. But relief quickly morphed into guilt. The next day, Henry asked about it, and I could see the excitement in his eyes as he recalled that moment of impromptu collaboration. I hesitated, my throat tightening as I confessed what I had done. Henry's expression turned from amusement to astonishment. "You threw it away? Why would you do that?" I wanted to scream my frustration at him, explain how he'd ruined something precious, but instead, I felt small. "Because it was mine, Henry. And it meant something to me," I finally managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. The silence that enveloped us felt heavier than ever, and he just nodded, looking away. I expected an argument, a confrontation, but instead, we both stood in the fallout of a decision that had felt both impulsive and justified. "You didn't even care about it," he countered quietly, hurt flashing across his features, and in that moment, I realized the different ways we valued art and expression. We didn't see eye to eye, and maybe we never would. That evening, I sat alone in my studio, contemplating my actions. It wasn't just about the canvas. It was about communication, respect for one another's passions, and how quickly love could devolve into misunderstandings. I thought about the work I wanted to do, the emotions that needed to flow, and I knew I had to reach out to Henry, to explain further, to tell him how much his excitement meant but how it clashed with my creative process. As the moonlight spilled through the window, illuminating my untouched canvases, a sense of clarity washed over me. Perhaps that was the lesson in all of this, not just about art but about understanding each other as we tread through our distinct worlds. Our relationship needed open conversations, a commitment to honor each other's spaces. I texted him, asking if we could meet and talk. He replied almost instantly, saying he'd really like that. As I prepared to step into an uncertain but necessary conversation, I was left contemplating whether I was truly the a-hole in this situation, or if we were just two artists in a world that sometimes felt too confined. In the weeks that followed, we learned to navigate our differences, finding a balance between my art and his enthusiasm as we started collaborating on new projects where we could both express our creativity without stepping on one another's toes. The discarded canvas became a reminder of our journey, a testament to the struggles that could end in understanding, and in that rawness, our relationship grew stronger. Sometimes, I still wonder if I should have approached the situation differently, but maybe it was all necessary, a chapter in our story that led to deeper connections, both artistically and emotionally. As I reflect on those days, I find myself smiling at how we transformed our creative chaos into a symphony of collaboration. The discarded canvas, painted with reckless abandon and then marred by unintended destruction, eventually became more than just a victim of frustration. It morphed into a catalyst for growth. It was during one of those late nights, and we sat in our quaint little living room, filled with the smell of brush strokes and oil paint, that I realized how much we had changed. We had taken steps to infuse more understanding into our artistic practices, but more importantly, we were learning to navigate our lives together in a way that felt harmonious rather than combative. I remember the soft glow of our desk lamp casting shadows on the walls, flickering like the moments of doubt and hope that intertwined our stories. I had brought home a few canvases, each one a blank slate, eager to embrace the new chapters we were writing. We decided one evening to create a mural on the large wall in the living room, a combined testament to our growth and a reflection of our journey together. He suggested we blend abstract designs, flowing shapes that could symbolize our individual paths merging into one. The planning was half the fun, brainstorming in the late hours of the night, discussing colors, even arguing playfully about which patterns would complement the other's style. We stood shoulder to shoulder, surrounded by bursting tubes of paint and the remnants of our previous projects, as laughter filled the air with a warmth that made the room feel alive. It was in those moments I felt the cracks of our earlier misunderstandings start to heal, each stroke on our mural reflecting our innate desire to express who we were and what we had fought through, paving a road to understanding. Sure, there were still hiccups along the way, he made a few accidental spills, and I had my share of exasperated sighs, but the atmosphere remained playful and light, filled with the essence of compromise. The mural itself turned out vibrant and chaotic, with swirls of blues and greens colliding but still fitting together in a strange, beautiful way, just like us. Once completed, it became a conversation starter for our friends who came over, a visual representation of our evolution intertwined like threads in a tapestry. Even on days when I felt a shadow of doubt creeping back in, I'd look at that mural, its colors speaking unspeakable truths about our partnership, and a sense of pride would wash over me. Looking back, I see that, while the moment of throwing away the ruined canvas was driven by frustration, it was precisely what we needed to ignite not just a conversation but a whole new dialogue within our evolving relationship. It's intriguing how one little action can spiral into such immense growth, leading to a bond fortified by creativity rather than just love. Sometimes I still wonder about the piece that had been tossed away, What it could have transformed into had we taken a different route. Yet somewhere deep down, I realized that every discarded moment has its purpose, leading us to the vibrant mural on our wall, a tale of understanding that will forever remind us of the beauty found within the chaos of love and art. As the weeks melted into months, I often found myself drawn to that vibrant mural, a collage of colors swirling together in chaotic harmony. It spoke not just of our artistic journey but of our journey as a couple, reflecting every argument and every compromise we had navigated together. Each swirl represented a moment in time, a glimpse into what it meant to truly collaborate and communicate. The eventual blending of our styles created something entirely new, a unique expression that still felt like us but was also something beyond our individual selves. I'd catch myself smiling at it while washing the dishes or during evening chats on the couch, wrapped up in our shared warmth. Sometimes Jimmy would tease me about staring at our masterpiece for too long, claiming I had an obsession. I'd laugh it off, but deep down, I knew he was right. It was a part of our lives now, almost like a guardian watching over our routines. But even as we flourished, I couldn't completely shake off the shadows of that old canvas. There were nights when I would trace the outline of the mural with my fingers, feeling the layers of paint beneath my touch, and I'd remember that first piece, the potential it held and the frustration it had caused. Did I make the right call? Each time that question flitted through my mind, Jimmy would always sense my distractions. "You okay?" he'd ask, setting down his sketchbook and shifting focus onto me, his brow creased with genuine concern. His kindness washed over me like a warm tide, pulling me back from my musings, and I'd reassure him, reminding myself I had to let go of that weight. We continued to bond through our projects, but with every brushstroke we painted together, I also began to see the cracks in my own patience. I was forgiving of his exuberance, but frustration bubbled beneath the surface when he attempted to take creative liberties on my designs. It started innocently enough, a splash of unexpected color on a planned composition, but before long, he would challenge my intentions, suggesting changes that were more reflective of his style than my own, and I found that familiar tension creeping back in. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting warm orange hues across the room, I stood before our latest piece, a work we had both poured our souls into. Jimmy joyfully suggested one more addition, a bright green streak across the center, and I felt a strange pang in my chest, a warning against complacency. "Maybe we should leave it as is," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, but the smile slowly faded from his face. "Why? We could make it even better. We've come this far together," he countered, enthusiasm undeterred, his eyes widening with excitement. But as he painted the bold green, I stared at the disruption, feeling my heart race, bracing against what felt like an impending clash. Memories of the ruined canvas rushed back, and rather than feeling the joy of creation, I was suffocated by the fear of losing my artistic integrity again. "It feels wrong, Jimmy," I finally croaked, forcing the words through a tightening throat. His brush froze mid-stroke, and in that silence, I could almost hear the echo of every previous misunderstanding bouncing off the walls. "What do you mean wrong? I thought we were in this together." The hurt in his voice sent a shiver through me, every word punctuated with raw emotion. I hesitated, feeling the weight of my dilemma. I could either fight for my vision or consider his perspective, pondering the fragile state of our connection. In that moment, I closed my eyes and chose vulnerability. "I'm scared, okay? I mean, look at what happened last time. I don't want to lose control like that again." The walls around my heart began to crumble, and as I opened my eyes, I found him staring back at me, the light reflecting concern on his face. "I get that," he said softly, taking a step back, "but it's not about losing control. This is collaboration, and collaboration means trust. I trust your judgment, and you have to trust mine too." Looking at him, I couldn't help but wonder how this relationship had transformed, how personal this bond had become, an intimate dance between passion and compromise. It was true, I had to let go of the past. I slowly lowered my guard, and instead of shutting him down, I proposed an idea that felt both risky and liberating. What if we painted some smaller pieces together, just as a way to test our balance? If we don't like something, we can always paint over it or let it go. He blinked at me, surprised, and a slow smile crept along his face. "I like that. A fresh start, right?" And just like that, a new dialogue brewed between us. We committed to smaller projects, immersing ourselves in trial and error rather than tangible expectations, opening ourselves to failures but celebrating the little moments of creation. As we painted, the air around us thickened with laughter, music, and a newfound understanding. The mural became a backdrop for our evolving friendship, and each smaller piece that emerged without the weight of overthinking became a splash of relief amidst our artistic memories. A couple of weeks later, as we stood before a series of colorful canvases strewn across the floor, I felt a warmth flood through me upon realizing how far we had come. The shadows of doubt hadn't vanished, but they danced around the newfound light we were cultivating. I knew this journey would continue to challenge us in unexpected ways, but with every stroke, we embraced the beautiful chaos. Even as I glanced back at the mural, I smiled at our past as much as our present. Together, we were crafting art amid the uncertainties of life and love, learning not just to cope with the unknown, but to celebrate it, a vibrant tapestry of joy and growth. And with that reflection warm in my heart, I felt hopeful about what lay ahead, both creatively and relationally. We had found a rhythm woven not just through our art but through our trust, our patience, and our growing love, inching us toward vibrant futures together. I had never imagined that constructing a dollhouse would ignite such a simmering conflict between my heart and my conscience, but sometimes the lines between right and wrong blur in unexpected ways. For years, I had poured my evenings into crafting intricate projects, each requiring patience and skill. My latest endeavor was a dollhouse, a stunning replica of our own home, complete with miniature furniture I'd fashioned from scraps. I envisioned it as a delightful surprise for my niece, Lily, who was just beginning to discover the joy of imaginative play. When I finally unveiled it to my wife, Jenna, one warm Saturday afternoon, I expected her to share in my excitement. Instead, I sensed a hesitation in her eyes, a shadow of disappointment that tugged at my gut. To Jenna, this wasn't just a dollhouse, it was a reminder of the children we had been trying to have for over 3 years. It was a painful echo of hope that had turned into sorrow, the dollhouse becoming a silent witness to our unfulfilled dreams. After she walked away, I was left standing in the living room, the dollhouse perched on the table like an altar to my own conflicting emotions. I spent the next few days wrestling with how to navigate this delicate territory. Lily was such an innocent light in our lives, always brimming with energy and curiosity, her laughter a beautiful distraction from our struggles. I could easily envision her joy, radiant as she played with tiny families inhabiting the dollhouse I had designed with so much love. Yet, was it fair to give that dollhouse to her, now knowing it could unintentionally deepen the hurt in my wife? Each night, I tried to compartmentalize my feelings, but guilt would creep in each time I envisioned Lily's bright smile. Jenna and I had our discussions about starting a family, and although they were often laced with hope, they were equally filled with anxiety and uncertainty. The pain of loss was ever present, and I had never seen Jenna more vulnerable than when we talked about what it meant for our future. As the weekend neared, the veiled tension between us grew palpable. I would catch Jenna staring at the dollhouse with a mix of longing and regret, almost as if it had taken on a life of its own, weaving its way into the fabric of our unspoken struggles. Each time she looked away, I felt a pang of guilt, followed by a sudden urge to lock it away, to spare her feelings. But then I heard Lily's laughter echoing in my head, and I could almost picture her tiny hands carefully adorning the dollhouse with her imaginative touches. This created an inner conflict that kept me tossing and turning late into the nights. Finally, it came to a head at dinner one evening. We had both been quiet, lost in our thoughts, when I finally broke the silence. "What if I gave the dollhouse to Lily?" I proposed gently, gauging her reaction. It was like I had flipped a switch. Jenna's eyes snapped to me, fraught with an intensity I hadn't seen in days. "Is that really what you want?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper, loaded with an incredulous sting. "Can it be both? Can it be a gift for Lily? But also a reminder that we can still create happiness?" I tried to explain, though each word felt heavier than the last, as if I were trying to lift the weight of our unfulfilled expectations with flimsy proposals. "No, but it means something different for me," Jenna replied, her voice breaking ever so slightly. There it was, the truth unveiled. It wasn't just about the dollhouse, it was about what it represented. I finally understood, it was a connection, a vision of familial joy. I watched the gravity of the moment settle between us like dust in a sunbeam. The more we talked, the more I realized that perhaps it wasn't merely an AITA scenario, it was about understanding, empathy, and navigating the tender landscape between love and loss. In the days that followed, I found myself standing before the dollhouse with a new perspective. I decided to give it to Lily but framed it differently. I crafted a small card to attach, explaining how it was built with love that could be shared, allowing Jenna to be part of that joy, yet giving me the strength to watch her smile grow brighter as our niece played. When I finally presented it to Lily, the sheer delight in her eyes made the choice worthwhile. Yet in the back of my mind, I knew that this dollhouse would always stand as a subtle reminder of our journey. It turned out that many months later, as I gifted another project to our niece, I was surprised by a simple email that Jenna sent after one of her late-night musings. "Remember that dollhouse? Lily still plays with it and loves how it looks just like our house," she wrote. "Maybe we can make that dollhouse a reality someday." And in that moment, the ache we had lived with seemed a little less heavy. The illusion had transformed into a dream, reminding us both that love, in all its forms, was something still worth building. The flickering light of the candles danced on the walls of our living room as I sat back in my chair, reminiscing about the work I had poured into that dollhouse. Each miniature detail represented not just a collection of wood and paint, but the fragments of our life together, the cozy living room with its tiny couch and absurdly intricate wallpaper that Jenna had picked out, or the kitchen with its miniature utensils that reminded me of the countless evenings we'd spent cooking side by side. It was here, in this quiet space, that I began to value those memories even more as a reflection of the love we had built amidst the uncertainty of our earlier years, a true testament to resilience. As I sipped my tea, I thought about that email. Hearing that Lily, my niece, enjoyed the dollhouse so much reignited a flicker of warmth in my chest. It felt incredible to know that the labor of love and creativity had not only honored mine and Jenna's story but had also bonded Lily with the very essence of our lives. She was transforming those memories into her own adventures. It was a bridge connecting the past and the present, reminding us that happiness could still bloom amid the challenges. Yet, as night settled in and the stars blinked into existence outside, the familiar sensation of guilt drifted back in, like an unwelcome guest at my door. Did I make the right decision by giving the dollhouse to Jenna and not to Lily? Though initially, it felt right to honor my wife's role in my life and the sacrifices she had made, I couldn't help but feel that perhaps I'd robbed Lily of something special. Did I inadvertently create a schism between their relationship, where my decision perhaps felt like an unintentional rejection of her place in my life? Jenna, perceptive as always, sensed my unease. She slipped onto the couch beside me, her warm presence shifting the air to a more comforting space. "You okay?" she asked quietly. Her voice was laced with a gentle empathy that made it easy to confide in her. The steady rhythm of my heartbeat seemed to sync with the flickering light of the candles as I let out a heavy sigh. "I've just been thinking about the dollhouse," I admitted, my voice almost a whisper against the backdrop of the softly crackling flames. "I hope I didn't make the wrong choice by not giving it to Lily." Jenna smiled knowingly and took my hand, intertwining her fingers with mine. "You gave her something even more valuable than the dollhouse," she replied softly. "You gave her the example of building a life filled with love and creativity. You showed her that our family can create and share beauty, and that she can dream of building something of her own one day too." Her words washed over me like the gentle embrace of a wave, reassuring me that our decision was not only justifiable but also imbued with a depth of understanding that transcended simple material gifts. It was an investiture, no longer a mere dollhouse, but a symbol of our shared journey, intertwined with the hopes we had for our own family as well. The next morning struck with the warmth of a new promise, and I found myself compelled to reach out to Jenna again. It was time we brought something to life that would encompass our love and hopes for the future, a project that could merge my skills and our dreams, into something tangible. We bounced ideas back and forth across the breakfast table, laughter slipping out between bites of toast, imagining a new dollhouse, this one a miniature embodiment of everything we envisioned for Lily, but with our fingerprints all over it. Weeks sped by, and slowly but surely, as if we were crafting our story one step at a time, the dollhouse began to take shape. "What if we include a tiny version of the tree in our yard?" I suggested during one evening of construction, the air heavy with the scent of sawdust and varnish. Jenna leaned closer, her eyes sparkling with enthusiasm as she devised clever ways to incorporate even more details. Every piece of wood we selected, every color we mixed, felt like an affirmation of our love, a quiet promise that the foundation of the dollhouse echoed our values. On the day we finished, we stood side by side, letting the weight of our work seep in as we admired the end result. The miniature dwelling glowed warmly in the light of the setting sun, and it suddenly struck me that we hadn't just crafted a dollhouse, we had built a tangible connection that bridged the love we shared with Lily. We decided to keep it a surprise, planning to unveil it at our next family gathering, where we would finally present a reflection of our journey to the next generation. As I lay in bed that night, my heart felt unburdened at last. The ache I had once felt had turned into something soft and bright, filled with the knowledge that love, especially when shared and woven into the lives of those we cherish, expands beyond what we originally envisioned. In its own unique way, it branches out, like a tree that steadily bears fruit as it grows, and I knew, just as the ideal dollhouse stood as proof of our journey, so, too, did our story continue to blossom with each passing day. Update: several weeks later, after that surprise unveiling filled with delight and tears of joy, Jenna and I received a touching message from Lily. "Thank you for the cozy dollhouse. It makes me so happy. I hope we can always build amazing things together." It reminded us that sometimes, the act of creation is as important as the creations themselves, and the love we pour into these projects only fosters deeper connections with those who matter most. The days that followed were filled with a gentle warmth that radiated from both our home and our hearts, an unspoken promise that we were stepping into a new chapter of our lives together. Jenna, ever the thoughtful one, began leaving little surprises around the house, an unexpected note tucked into my lunch, a small bouquet of wildflowers on the kitchen counter in the morning. It was her way of reminding me that while the past had its weight, the present could still be woven from joy and love. One weekend, we decided to take a trip to an artist's market down near the waterfront. I remember the vibrant colors of handmade pottery and the sounds of laughter drifting through the air as we wandered together, hand in hand. We stumbled upon a stall filled with little wooden figurines, each one hand-carved and painted with such care that they seemed to squeeze their way into your heart. Jenna picked up a small family set, a father, a mother, and 2 children. "They remind me of us," she said, a soft smile dancing on her lips. It was true, they felt like tiny echoes of our hopes and dreams for the future. We purchased them on a whim, and as we carried them back to the car, I found myself struck by the thought that every piece we gathered was another thread in the tapestry we were weaving together. The months slipped by in a blissful blur, and each week, Lily would fill our home with her laughter as she came over to play. The dollhouse had become her sanctuary, and Jenna and I often found her tucked away, deep in imaginary worlds she created with her tiny figurines. I caught glimpses of their adventures, a family picnic with the little wooden parents and their even smaller children, elaborate tea parties hosted by the family of dolls, and sometimes even the family making a trip to the beach in another imaginative play. It was enchanting to witness, like watching a painter fill the empty canvas of childhood's imagination. There was a day I returned home after a long week at work, feeling the weight of the world pressing on my shoulders. As I entered the house, I was greeted by the soft sounds of laughter echoing from the living room. I made my way there, and nothing could prepare me for the scene that unfolded. There was Jenna, seated on the floor, surrounded by colored paper, scissors, and remnants of drawings. And there was Lily, her eyes bright, fully immersed in crafting furniture for the dollhouse they had decided needed upgrades. The sight sent a wave of warmth through me. I stood there for a moment, quietly observing, allowing the tranquility of the moment to wash over me, a testament to the connections being nurtured in our little home. As that evening drew to a close, I couldn't help but think about the journey we had taken, the transitions, the trials, and ultimately, the love that had stitched us back together. With Lily beside her, Jenna looked up and smiled at me. "You have to see what we've made." In that moment, the burdens I had carried felt lighter, and the future stretched before us like an open road. Perhaps the dollhouse was not merely a beautiful construction, but rather a symbol of resilience and creativity flourishing between generations. That night, we gathered around the dining table, sharing laughter and stories, Lily's wide eyes lighting up as she recounted the adventures of her dolls. She was always the mischievous little sister in her tales, and we hung on her every word, savoring the sweetness of her imagination. Reflection on that whirlwind of emotions led me to realize, love, like creativity, is built with both care and time, and sometimes the best creations aren't the ones we see before us, but the memories we craft and the bonds we strengthen. As I watched Jenna and Lily hunched over their paper crafts, I understood that every moment we spent building something together, be it in the form of a dollhouse or in the quiet moments of everyday life, was a precious thread in the rich tapestry of our existence. And as the sun dipped gently below the horizon, casting a warm golden glow across our home, I whispered a silent promise to myself, to always build, to always share, and to never forget the courage it took to embrace love in all its beautiful, messy forms. I have this recurring dream, the kind that stays with you long after you wake up, lingering at the edges of your consciousness like a familiar fog. In it, I'm back in my small apartment, the walls adorned with mismatched memorabilia from my childhood, and the glow of the television casts soft shadows across the clutter. I'd curled up on the couch, a spirited mixture of pillows and warm blankets, with the familiar theme song of my absolute comfort show echoing in my ears. If there's anything uniting my college friends and me over the years, it's the series we could watch a million times and never tire of, That Cozy Life. It's a quirky sitcom about a group of friends maneuvering through life's ups and downs, with quirky plots that always ended in heartwarming moments and the kind of humor that felt like a hug. One evening, while taking a break from my work, I decided to indulge in a binge-watch session. I reached the episode where one of the characters, Elizabeth, confronts her insecurities when her childhood friend returns to town with a life that seems so picture-perfect. As the weight of her feelings washed over her, I felt a pang of recognition ripple through me. It was subtle yet profound, an uninvited reminder of the mounting pressure I felt about my own life choices. You see, I graduated with a degree in literature a year prior, but while my friends soared into burgeoning careers, I found myself working part-time at a local bookstore, surrounded by the musty scent of old pages while my dreams remained wedged between the spines of books I longed to write. I began to question everything, feeling much like my on-screen counterpart caught in a storm of self-doubt, waiting for that breakthrough moment. It was during this time that I reconnected with Mia, my childhood best friend who had left our sleepy town to conquer the big city. In a flurry of excited messages, we agreed to meet up, and I desperately hoped she would bring with her the kind of ambition that once inspired me. When we finally met, we sat in our favorite cafe, the smell of fresh coffee enveloping us as we reminisced about those blissful days of youth that seemed so simplistic in retrospect. Yet as she spoke about her fast-paced life filled with exciting opportunities and endless networking, I could feel my own insecurities rising like a tide. Her sizable success felt intimidating, and my aspirations felt small and silly, as if I'd pitifully missed the memo on how to transform dreams into reality. The hours melted away, but my feelings of inadequacy only deepened. It was then that the memory of that cozy life flickered back into my mind, specifically its ability to weave lessons into its light-hearted fabric. I could almost hear Elizabeth's voice saying that success wasn't just a straight path but a winding road filled with bumps and detours, better shared with friends who understood your journey. Finding comfort in this thought, I invited Mia to watch an episode with me, hoping it would create a moment of connection, even in our divergent paths. Surprisingly, she agreed. We laughed until our sides hurt while watching Elizabeth's comedic misadventures and heart-forward journey. When the finale credits rolled, I shared with Mia how the show had always been my safe haven, a means to escape whenever I felt overwhelmed by the real world. In return, she opened up about her struggles with feeling lonely despite her successes, revealing that behind the glimmering facade, she often craved the depth of true connection, something our bond once provided effortlessly. It felt liberating, sharing our vulnerabilities, almost like we were both characters in an episode, two old friends who wandered off script only to find their way back together. By the dusk of that evening, the weight of the world felt lighter, the connection we re-established was profound yet simple. Little did I know that this reconciliation would serve as the catalyst for my journey toward embracing my dreams without the harsh lens of comparison. The days turned into weeks as I found solace in rewatching my beloved series whenever I felt the pressures of adult life creeping up again, allowing those comforting episodes to remind me of the importance of my own narrative. As the months rolled by, I slowly began to pen my own stories, starting with daily snippets inspired by moments observed at the bookstore, drawings from our cafe escapades, and the laughter shared in those newly forged memories. Just the other night, I received a message from Mia that made my heart flutter. She relayed how she'd been watching That Cozy Life too, and found every episode echoing her doubts and aspirations, much like mine. With a burst of excitement and courage, I told her about my new writing project and asked if she'd consider being a beta reader. With her enthusiastic response, I realized the comfort show that warmed our hearts had woven its lessons tightly into our lives, allowing us to share paths filled with uncertainty but also ignited by mutual support and understanding. Life may not be a neatly wrapped sitcom, but as we both learned, it can be just as beautiful to find warmth in familiar ties. I figured sharing my journey on a Reddit thread could lead to further connections and reflections, so I posted under Confessions, hoping to find others who felt similarly. The supportive feedback rolled in, weaving a new network of friendships across the digital expanse. The Comfort Show had not only offered me solace but introduced me to a community that mirrored the support I truly needed. In retrospect, I realized that while we may never achieve the perfection portrayed on screen, embracing our flawed but vibrant stories transforms mere comfort into genuine courage. The cozy moments tend to hold the most strength, don't they? After all, life is a series of episodes, each rich in its small imperfections and lessons, echoing through laughter and connection. What more could one ask for in the grand script of our lives? As I settled back into my usual routine, I found myself reflecting on the warmth the show had brought into my life, a warmth that seemed to resonate long after the closing credits rolled. I remember binge-watching the series late at night, the glow from the screen wrapping around me like an old, comforting blanket. But it wasn't just the storyline that captivated me, it was the profound sense of understanding I felt from the characters who faced their own struggles, triumphs, and moments of vulnerability. They became friends I never met, existing in a world where flaws were celebrated rather than hidden. Each time I started another rewatch, the familiar dialogue and laughter flowed through my apartment as if it had seeped into every corner, transforming my space into a sanctuary away from the chaos outside. I began sharing my experience with this series on an online forum, weaving together the intricate details of my own life with those of the characters. I reminisced about how the protagonist, with their struggles to find balance between work and relationships, echoed my own internal battles. When I pressed send on my post, I felt a sense of dread, waiting for either silence or criticism, but instead, my inbox flooded with sympathetic messages and stories from others who felt the same. Each interaction became a moment of connection, reminding me that we are all spinning in our own orbits yet inevitably drawn to one another, like planets in a grand cosmic dance. But it was during one late-night reply to a fellow user, their story similar to mine, their struggles palpable, that a twist emerged. They shared how this comfort show had inadvertently helped them cope with their own mental health issues, and it struck a chord in me. I thought of the nights I had sat paralyzed by anxiety, the series lightening my heavy heart, and suddenly felt compelled to give back in some small way. I began organizing virtual watch parties, inviting all those who had reached out, creating a space where we could engage over our shared love for the show. The first gathering felt electric. I could almost hear the pulse of the collective as laughter erupted with every punchline and nostalgic moment. We traveled through our favorite episodes together, voices overlapping in a joyful cacophony of commentary, and in those moments, something remarkable happened. I felt a shift. The heaviness that had lingered in my chest for months began to slip away, replaced by the buoyancy of new friendships forged in the glow of our beloved series. Each gathering deepened our connections, unraveling layers of vulnerability, humor, and warmth, and we soon found ourselves discussing everything from life dreams to fears, so intimate and real it felt surreal. But as the weeks passed and winter settled in outside my window, I noticed one of the participants, Jamie, grew quiet. Their laughter had once been infectious, but during our last meeting, it felt distant, as if a shadow had fallen over their spirit. Concerned, I reached out privately, checking in and sharing my worry. It wasn't long before Jamie replied, spilling their heart out in a series of messages. They spoke of feeling lost, adrift in a world that seemed increasingly isolating, weighed down by expectations, and how the solace they found in our gatherings had begun to feel like a highlight against the drudgeries of life. Suddenly, I realized I wasn't just the spectator of my show anymore, I was an active participant in someone else's story. I suggested we have a one-on-one call where we could talk openly, just the two of us. That night, as we spoke, a vulnerability emerged, raw and beautiful. Jamie shared their dreams of pursuing art, their struggles with rejection, and their longing for connection. I listened intently, offering encouragement and sharing my own fears of inadequacy, and as the conversation flowed, it felt like we were crafting our own narrative, one of resilience and hope. Days turned into weeks, and Jamie and I became inseparable during our virtual meetups. With each discussion, we stretched out our dreams and uncertainties like threads, weaving them into something new and vibrant. Inspired by our dynamic, we decided to host a live episode commentary on our favorite parts, creating a new series of posts for those in the community to join us. It was a success. The chatrooms lit up with excitement, the joy felt like fireworks bursting across a darkened sky. In the end, Jamie and I both realized something profound, that our comfort show, while cherished, was never truly the star of the universe, it was the friendships born from it that shone the brightest. Reflecting on this journey, I smiled, knowing that sometimes the most transformative moments come not from the escapism of a favorite episode, but from the connections we foster while embracing our imperfections with courage. Life, after all, had become its own blend of sitcom unpredictability and heartfelt emotional depth, and I was more than ready for the next season to begin. Even amid the uncertainty, I knew, as the credits rolled on this chapter of our story, there was always room for another laugh, another episode, and another friend. I could hardly wait to see what came next, ready to watch the unfolding tapestry of our lives together, the comfort show continuing to inspire us in ways we were only just beginning to understand. In the days that followed, the haze of uncertainty began to lift. I found myself immersed in the online community crafted around our beloved comfort show. Late-night discussions bubbled with animated spontaneity and earnest reflections, while the threads of personal anecdotes intertwined with favorite scenes and shared quotes, forming a tapestry of camaraderie both sweet and reassuring. It was a safe haven. During one particularly quiet evening, I curled up on my couch wearing my favorite oversized sweatshirt, the glow of my laptop illuminating my excitedly furrowed brows. I opened a thread titled Life Lessons from My Comfort Show, and the posts poured in, mirroring our myriad experiences through our shared lens. I read about someone who had lost their job but found the courage to chase their dream of starting a bakery, channeling the spirit of the quirky character we all loved who had redefined failure into a zesty journey of personal reinvention. I smiled at the words of another, who had battled anxiety by replicating the show's unpredictable bravery through small, conscious steps in their daily life. It was like witnessing a series of life scripts intertwining with our favorite sitcom moments, each anecdote brimming with vulnerability and hope. As I watched the clock slide past midnight, a sense of anticipation electrified the air, urging me to take the plunge. A post began forming in my mind, a confession of sorts, combining my personal struggles and an honest tribute to the influence the show had had on my life. With deliberate movements, I started typing. I wrote about how comforting it was to have my own version of that friend from the show who nudged me to embrace spontaneity, urging me to venture out into life rather than waiting for it to come to me. I unconsciously penned down how the catchphrases hovering in our lexicon had shifted from being mere jokes to becoming mantras I whispered to myself during panic-stricken moments. Each sentence flowed easily, my fears spilling out in delicate bursts of honesty. The screen glowed brightly as I finally typed, "In a world painted with anxiety and uncertainties, I find solace in our shared laughter, the connection through flawed characters who echo my own story. Sometimes, I dare to hope I can embody their courage, even if just a little." Once posted, I didn't expect much, anticipating the regular ebb and flow of online life. Yet, within hours, my notifications began to light up like a festival of digital camaraderie. People were sharing their own reflections, building this comforting bridge between their narratives and mine. I found sort of a strange magic in the shared vulnerabilities, the strengths and weaknesses in our piece of the comfort show's vast landscape. Every reply added a new glimmer of hope, a ripple of joy punctuated with laughter. One response, in particular, caught my eye, a message from someone named Jamie, who relayed how they had started their own podcast to discuss similar themes, referencing an episode that mirrored my confession. They wrote, "Let's collaborate. It feels like our stories could guide one another." I realized then that sometimes, behind a computer screen, extraordinary connections form from the simplest of words. As weeks turned into months, Jamie and I began our collaboration, diving deep into the themes interwoven in our lives and our comfort show. We created a small but passionate audience who resonated with our stories of awkwardness, courage, love, and friendship. The podcast blossomed, allowing both of us to explore our thoughts and feelings publicly yet intimately, as if we were peeling back the layers of vulnerability together, like two characters in our very own heartwarming episode. With each new recording session, I could feel my initial hesitations melt away, replaced by an eagerness to share my voice, to really continue unearthing our collective humanity. I often reflected on this new dynamic, how our lives, much like our comfort show, contained humor and depth, a balance that felt both comforting and exhilarating to explore. Every new guest we interviewed infused our conversations with fresh perspectives, spiraling us into meaningful discussions that bubbled with joy and authenticity. But more importantly, they served as gentle reminders of the quirks that make our stories uniquely ours. And then there came a day unlike any other, where our podcast reached a significant milestone, our 100th episode. It felt surreal, almost unreal, celebrating an anniversary where each part of our journey was woven through the echoes of laughter, inspiration, and healing. That night, as Jamie and I recorded, there was an electricity in the air, a blend of nervous energy and vibrant hope. I spoke a little deeper that time, relaying to our listeners how we began this journey amid uncertainties and doubts, drawing strength from the comfort show that had first inspired me to be braver than I felt. Sitting in that small recording room, surrounded by all the memories we had accumulated thus far, moments where we forged our friendship, advocated for one another, and crafted honest discussions that opened our hearts, I knew this was more than just a podcast. It was a living, breathing testament to the connections we forge when we step into the light of vulnerability. As I signed off that night, a comforting thought echoed in my mind: no matter what the next season holds, I have found my rhythm in this episodic journey called life, hand in hand with newfound friends echoing the lessons of our beloved characters. I drifted to sleep that night filled with a warm sense of purpose, ready for whatever came next, ready to embrace it all without fear, knowing that each chapter was merely a beautiful interplay of shared experiences and laughter, another episode in the vast melodrama of our imperfect existence. And this was simply the beginning.